I thought your mind worked quicker than that.
You know, because I prepare this class and the Sunday class, you know, the same way and for the same time period. And then I realized, you know, this class is only like 60% of that class. Because by the time we get done, you know, talking and doing master's min stuff and all that stuff, you know, we don't start usually till 1/4 or 10 till, and then we go till 10 after or 25 after and stuff like that. And I don't know why that never dawned on me before. So I'm going to try to regulate the stuff so we're a little bit more complete at the end of each session. That won't be the case today because I realized that after I'd done my preparation. I don't know why I never thought of that before. Anyway, so look, we're talking about the 7 seals, okay? And the first 4 we did with the 4 horsemen. You got the charts. We talked about it. I have a this sheet here, because what I want to do is we're going to skip over the 5th seal for right now. I'll pick that up when we get into chapter 7, but I want to go into the 6th seal itself, you know, which is all the cosmic activity, you know, that's happening in there. But on the sheet from last week called 6 seals, I've got on the back side of the sheet, I've got the 6th seal in Revelation 6, the futurist view, and then I've got the preterist view, okay? And these are 2 big differences, the way that people read the book of Revelation and the Olivet Discourse in Matthew 24. I won't say what's right or wrong, okay? I mean, I take the preterist view myself, but the futurist view takes all that activity, and that activity is, Carl, can you read the sixth seal? Well, no, in your Bible. I think it starts at 12, yeah.
I watched as he opened the 6th seal. There was a great earthquake. The sun turned black like sackcloth made of goat hair. The whole moon turned blood red, and the stars in the sky fell to the earth as late figs drop from a fig tree when shaken by a strong wind. The sky receded like a scroll, rolling up, and every mountain and island was removed from its place. Then the kings of the earth, the princes, the generals, the rich, the mighty, and every slave, and every free man hid in caves and among the rocks of the mountains. They called to the mountains and the rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of their wrath has come, and who can stand?
Okay, thank you. So here's the question. When does this take place? You know, are we waiting for that to happen? You know, like at the end of time, at the second coming of Christ? Or is this something that has already happened? And that would be at the destruction of the temple in Israel. Okay, this is difficult stuff. So the futurists will say, no, that's in the future. Okay, that's coming one day when the Antichrist is revealed and the armies march against God and all that. And that's the futurist view. Preterist view will say, no, this is fulfilling something that Jesus talked about on the people of this generation. That second sheet I handed out to you, well, I guess it was the first one I handed out today. We'll get into that later. Talks about when he says this generation. Now, preterism gets kind of a bad rap because there's full preterists and there's partial preterists. I know I'm probably talking over your head on stuff that you haven't heard about before, but it's important. Is that, see, full preterists say everything has already happened. The return of Christ has happened. The resurrection has happened. Everything in the book of Revelation has happened, done deal, gone. Okay, and then you have what's called partial preterists. Okay, and they say, well, no, most of this stuff has happened, but there's still a second coming to come. You have the judgment, and you have the second coming of, and you have the resurrection of the dead still. And that's my position, is that most of the stuff has happened, but you still have the return of Christ, the judgment, the resurrection still, still to come. The thing is that everybody is a preterist, because all you have to do is take, before Jesus came, how many prophecies were there about Jesus? The number's around 300, okay? Everybody uses that number, so I use that number. 300, and when Jesus came, he fulfilled all 300 prophecies. So you'd be a preterist. All preterism means is in the past. That's all that the word means. It's a Latin word. It just means in the past. So we look at all the prophecies about Jesus and we look at them in the past. And that doesn't hurt our faith anymore. We don't have to say, oh no, we have to have these prophecies still to be able to live out our faith and all that. And it's the same way with the book of, the book of Revelation, to be that way. The reason that it's important is, hang on, I told you my papers were a mess, is to have a proper view of the, of these events. It's a matter of the inaccuracy. I've got this written down. It says, inaccurate eschatology causes the church to wait for a king who already reigns. People are waiting for, Jesus to come back and reign on the earth. He's already reigning. He's reigning in heaven. He sits at the right hand of the Father. He's reigning because it said at the end of Matthew, he says, all authority has been given unto me. Okay. So a kingdom that they're already in, making them wait for a kingdom that they're already in. We're in God's kingdom now. The church is God's kingdom here on earth. Okay. To wait to become what they already are. We're sons of God, waiting for an age that's already come. Anyway, the thing is that the futurists are waiting for all these things to happen so that all those things will happen. That his kingdom will finally be here, and this and that. So that's that. Any questions about that? I know it's kind of confusing, and it's,
It's the part about starting at verse 15 then, about the kings are all fearful, hiding, waiting for the last destruction, I guess. That I'm starting to think where in history that
well, I think, well,
the past events, where that.
well, yeah. Well, I think a part of that is they're talking about what's happening during that destruction. So those kings are waiting for that to happen while that is happening. The destruction of Jerusalem and the temple took 3 years to happen. So there's a lot of interaction that's in there. Now, good point though. So my view is all this stuff that we're seeing in the seals, that we'll see in the trumpets, and that we'll see in the bowls is happening to the Jews. It's happening to Jerusalem and the temple, the destruction of the temple. And I'll show you that as we go along. What I think happens afterwards, when we get into, I got to think of this, chapter 13, where it talks about the beast out of the sea and the beast out of the land. I think there he's talking about the church, that the beast, which, the beast out of the sea is government. It's, what's my word I want? Bad government. It's Nero. It's the stuff that the emperors are doing to the church at that time. Now we can say, yeah, all governments will eventually turn into the beast, whatever you want to define the beast. The church out of the land is bad religion that goes after the church, not to be your antichrist. But I think there there's a part there that talks about not the Jews and not the temple and not Jerusalem, but it's talking about the church being persecuted and all that. But I think also it's written talking to them there, them back then. Okay. Okay. And there's a whole bunch of places that we can see it. It's too deep of a subject to go into here. I'm just trying to set the pastor said something at the very end last week about there's a lot of comfort in Revelation, but he wouldn't start with Revelation with a new believer, to show comfort. There's other places and better places, but heck, we're already into this. I was watching a video of a friend of mine who was retiring as a Calvary Chapel pastor after 40 some years. We used to be close at one time and all that. Well, it's not that we're not close, we're just not physically close, so we don't have. But see, they're all into this futurist view, the rapture theology, dispensationalism, whatever it is. But one comment that he made, so I wrote it down. Good thing about YouTube videos, you can rewind them so you can catch up. And he's talking about the times. He was talking about current times. He says, the Bible and the newspaper headlines, cable news stories, events go together. He says, the events that the Bible says will take place are actually happening right before our very own eyes. He can have that view. I mean, that's not my view, but I'm just saying. So he's got all of these events happening now. But 40 years ago, when I came into the church in 1981, that was a big time for, because a lot of people were saying that Jesus was going to return in 1988. You guys know about Jesus returning in 1988? He was going to return in 1988. This was in 81. So they're talking about, that he would return in a generation being 40 years. Well, what happened 40 years before 1988? It'd be 1948 for you math wizards. The reestablishment of the nation Israel. Okay. Oh, so anyway, so the rapture. Okay, this is the thing. The rapture was going to be in 1981 because the rapture, according to them, is going to happen 7 years before the return of Christ. The church gets raptured, 7 years of tribulation. Jesus returns with the church, sets up his kingdom here on earth. So anyway, by holding the newspaper in one hand and the Bible in the other, they came to, like I say, this is what I walked into when I became a Christian, was that 1981, the church was going to be raptured out. Well, that didn't happen. But whatever event comes at, John Walvoord, he was the dean at Dallas Theological Seminary, and they're the brain center for this rapture theology, dispensationalism. Now, he wrote a book back in the early to mid 70s about the last days of Israel and Middle East oil, because that's when the gas shortages were. But that was going to lead to the end of the world, and it didn't. He rewrote the book in the early 80s, like that same title, a second edition, updated it some, and nothing happened. He wrote the book a third time, but he changed the title the third time because now it became, because Iran was now the bad guys, and all that. So see, this stuff happens, and I just can't imagine that when Jesus is talking, that he's talking about what's going to happen in the Middle East in the year 2000 or, whatever it is. So on the, let's see how far we can get through this. On the sheet that says, what's it say? Comparison of Jesus. Did your title say that? Comparison of Jesus judging Jerusalem and the temple. Pardon? Is that what it says? Yeah, okay, yeah. So let me put this down here. I thought somebody was saying something. So look, here's what happened. Oh, wait. Got one other thing. I told you this would be a mess. I brought for you guys to see, my new Schofield Reference Bible. Anybody know the Schofield Reference Bible? Schofield Reference Bible is at the turn of last century was the Bible if you wanted to know dispensational theology, and that's that futuristic rapture theology and stuff like that. Found something in a footnote. I read footnotes. Now listen to what it says. So this is in footnote for chapter Revelation 3:21. This is back to when we were talking about the churches like Laodicea and all that. And he says, in 20, he says, in verse 20, he says, behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man hear my voice and open the door, I will come into him and will sup with him and he with me. This King James English, that's what it says. To him that overcometh will I grant to sit with me in my throne, even as I also overcame, even after I overcame, and am set down with my Father in his throne. Okay? So he's saying, whoever comes into me, I offer a place to sit at my throne. And their footnote, this is important. Their footnote says, this passage in harmony with Luke 1, some verses, Acts 2, some verses, is conclusive that Christ is not now seated upon his own throne. It says the Davidic covenant and the promises of God through the prophets and the angel Gabriel concerning it. Anyway, it goes on, about, and so people reading the footnotes because the footnotes are right? I think most people read the footnotes. I don't get that out of that passage. But they do, and then they run with it. So what they're saying is, yeah, Jesus today does not sit on his own throne. You have to wait until he returns to earth, and he will sit on David's throne. And they make a big deal like David's throne is a physical throne, which I assume when he comes, he'll have to go get a U-Haul, go to that place where the Ark of the Covenant is stored, and find the road that David's throne is stored and bring, it's just, I hate to make fun, but I'm good at it. Anyway, so I've got here on the Matthew 21, the triumphal entry into Jerusalem, okay? And what he does is, you guys know the story when he comes and cleanses the temple. What does he do? He goes into the temple, said, you've made my father's house a den of thieves. He overturns the tables, chases the people out, like that. And that, pardon?
Throws a rod.
Yeah, no. So anyway, so that's, that's in Matthew. But in John, this is towards the end of his ministry. It's at he enters in on the triumphal entry. But John has a cleansing at the beginning of his gospel, basically the same thing. So the question is, was there one cleansing or was there two cleansings? See, I say there's two cleansings, but people will say, we don't know for sure, but people say, well, John just put it at that same cleansing at the beginning of his gospel and not at the end of his gospel. This is going to relate to the destruction of Jerusalem, okay? So why are there two temple cleansings offered? Anybody ever heard this before? Good, I'm glad to be the one to present it. In Leviticus, it says, you know what, I was going to read the whole thing, but I think I'll just give you the short version here. In Leviticus, well, let me read the very beginning. It says, when you come into the land of Canaan, which I give you for possession, and I put a cause of leprous disease in a house in the land of your possession, then he who owns the house shall come tell the priest, there seems to me to be some case of disease in the house. That's what he'd be saying. Then the priest shall command that they empty the house before the priest goes to examine the disease. So he says there's disease in the house, take everything out of the house, and then the priest is going to come and he's going to examine. So he goes in, examines. If he sees the leprosy there, because it gets in the walls and all that stuff, there's something they have to do. They have to cleanse the house. They have to scrape the walls, scrape the ceilings, wash everything down. They've already taken everything out of it. The priest comes, he says, I'll be back in 7 days. Okay, in 7 days, when he comes back, what if the disease is still there after they've cleansed it? And it works its way down to, in the end, if the disease is gone, you're fine. Okay. If the disease is still there, they tear down the house. They've already taken all the stuff to the dump outside the city. They tear down the house. The description is they tear down the house, timber by timber, stone by stone, and scrape the ground. What does that sound like? Yeah, what happened to the temple? So if Jesus went twice, he cleanses the temple, and then he goes back at the end of his ministry to find out if it took or if there's still disease, be sin in the temple. And then he declares what will become of the temple. Okay? Here's why this is important. Remember, Jesus, in Revelation 4 and 5, when we saw the heavenly scene, and Jesus comes in and he takes the scroll from the Father. Okay, and what does he do when he takes the scroll from the Father? He starts opening the seals. And that's what we had the last couple of times. He opens the seals and they call out just death and destruction. I mean, I'll just summarize it that way. They call out death and destruction. But who's in charge of doing that? Who's the one who's actually calling for the destruction of Israel and the temple in those seals? It's Jesus. He's the one who's got he's the only one who's capable of opening that, because he's carrying out the judgment that we'll see when we get to Matthew 24, okay, in the Olivet Discourse. He's just carrying out what he prophesied 40 years earlier. Oh, and how long is 40 years? If he died in 30 and the temple was destroyed in 70, it's a generation. You know, that generation. So he does that. Okay, he cleanses the temple. I have there the fig tree in Matthew 21, 18 and 19, or 8. I don't know if it's 18 or not. Yeah, 18. It says, in the morning, as he was returning to the city, he became hungry, and seeing a fig tree by the wayside, he went to it and found nothing on it, but only leaves. Now, my contention is he's talking about faithless Israel. He came to them, he came to his own people, and he finds nothing of value, nothing that what a fig tree is supposed to, hang on just a second, Denny, nothing that a fig tree is supposed to do, just like Israel is nothing that God's people is to do. And he went to it, found nothing on it, but only leaves, and he said to it, may no fruit ever come from you again, and the fig tree withered. And that's one of the things in the Revelation 6:13. It says, and the stars of heaven fell to the earth as a fig tree drops its late figs when it is shaken by a mighty wind. And shaken by a mighty wind is that tribulation, Denny.
Yeah, you move fast and I'm slow to catch up.
No, no,
I was fact checking you a little bit.
No,
about
that's
the
good.
first
That- no,
and
no,
second
that's-
cleaning.
that's good.
So I read, John 2:13-16.
Wait, you read, what? You're,
Matthew
wait,
21.
wait, it's kind of muffled over here, so
Okay.
take it away from your mouth a little bit.
I read John 2, verse 13 through
Uh-huh.
16, and Matthew 21, 12 through 17. It seems like they're talking about the same time that Jesus cleansed the temple.
Well, I don't know that he's talking about the same time. John, like I say, John's got it at the beginning of his ministry, and they've got it at the end of the ministry.
Okay,
I
so
mean,
it wasn't two cleansings, it was just one.
No, I'm saying that there was two. Other people can say that there's one. They can just say that John put the cleansing of the temple at the beginning of his for whatever purpose he had, and Matthew, Mark, and Luke have it at the end. Yeah.
Still seems like that's just one.
What's that?
Still seems like that's just one cleansing that Jesus did
Could be,
himself.
could be. I'm just telling you, if there's a rationale for two, it's that passage in Leviticus. You know, because Jesus is doing everything that Israel didn't do. Okay? Who, you know, out in the wilderness, the Israelites had an idol, the golden calf. In Jerusalem, after the resurrection, or after Jesus, or after the 3 years of preaching from Jesus, what was their golden calf? The temple. You know, they swear on the temple. The temple is their golden calf, and Jesus is going to destroy the golden calf of them, just like he destroyed the golden calf of, you know, of the people in the wilderness.
They worship the temple.
Pardon?
They
They worshiped the temple. No, they just like it was like an idol to them, and Jesus gave them 40 years to come to their senses and close it off. So in Matthew 23, that whole chapter, follow the order here, okay? So, you know, so we've got the, we've got the judgments and the cleansings of the temples. We got the comparison of the fig tree. Then he goes into chapter 23 and he pronounces the 7 woes on the Jewish leadership. You know, but woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you shall, you know, and he goes on, just 7 different times he's going on. That's pretty bad. When he's pronouncing woes, you know, he's not recruiting people at that point. He's condemning people. And he says in 23:36, right after the woes, he says, all these things will come upon this generation. All the things that he did with the woes, you know, all the things that he's talking about, he's making a point to them. It's going to come to your generation. In 37 through 39, the same passage, he says it's not just to the leaders, but the whole population. When he prays over Jerusalem, he says, "Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the one who kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to her. How often I wanted to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you were not willing." Okay? And now remember, he's sitting there, he's sitting up on the hill there, looking over Jerusalem, you know, and he's saying these things. And in 38, if you read what he says, see, your house is left desolate. What's their house? Temple. This is 40 years before it gets done, but he's making these prophecies. Okay, I just want to bring this to Revelation 6 when we're talking about the seals and this destruction. What is it that's being carried out, and what is being destroyed? It's that old covenant. It's the old covenant itself, that old relationship that God had with his people, and it's on the temple itself. The temple time's over. Okay. So verse 38's is the key verse. See, your house is left desolate, left to you desolate. And then he goes into, I got to check time. Then he goes into Matthew 24. Okay. And that's the Olivet Discourse. And that's where he's bringing all this together. And, I think what Lowell brought up to me, Lowell's going, what did I bring it to him? Lowell was telling me he read the Olivet Discourse, right?
Yeah.
Read it a couple of times, right? Yeah. And your question was, who is this on or what? Oh, you said, are we in the tribulation?
Yeah.
That was your question. Are we in the tribulation? And no, I think they were in the tribulation, the great tribulation. That's the thing. The great tribulation. We all have tribulation. I mean, just look at us at prayer time, like that. I mean, people in different groups have the worst kinds of tribulation. I mean, you look at Christians in some of these countries, like, in China, or the ones who try to survive in some of these East African countries or the Sudan, where whole churches, whole communities get wiped out. Hey, to me, for them, that is great tribulation. That's the great tribulation where they're tested. Were you going to say something, Carl? Yeah.
Doesn't every generation have its own great tribulation?
Yeah, well, they have tribulation. Let's put it this way. Jesus told the church, you will have tribulation. But whether that's a great tribulation that gets described here, I think that's on Drew. I've read 2 or 3 times the passages from Josephus, from the Jewish wars, and how cruel, that takeover, was that 3-year siege on Jerusalem. I mean, if they had modern day weapons, it would have been over a lot sooner. But, the conditions inside the city walls were a lot worse than what the conditions were on the outside where the Romans were. The Romans were all fat and happy and living right because they had a supply line. And inside the city, they had no supply line for all of that, for all of that time. And remember, we don't like to talk about it, but God uses wicked people to bring punishment on his people. I mean, I don't understand it. I mean, if any of you understand it, I mean, I'll give you the microphone and you can, no, seriously, the Assyrians, wicked people, took out the 10 tribes of the northern kingdom in 721 BC. We remember it well. We watched it on CNN. But he took, that was God's punishment on those 10 kingdoms. That Assyria comes down, wipes them out, takes them off into captivity to never return. And then 150 years later, in 586, he does the same things to the southern kingdoms with the Babylonians. And the Babylonians weren't nice people either, And now he does the same thing because he can't get these people to, this is in modern day Christian language, okay? He can't get these people to follow Jesus and drop their temple worship. Like that. And so what's the only way that he can break them of that? Here comes Titus and the Romans, and does the same thing, destroys the temple, destroys the city, kills 1 million people, and Israel's never been the same, has never been the same since. And even now they get back in the land, and I don't think that political, ethnic political Egypt, Israel is the nation of Israel, of God's people, back then. But now they get back in the land and they've got no peace, So this is what's happening, what we see. We'll get into the Olivet Discourse a little bit next week, but this is what we see when we're looking at, and I do this when we see the seals here, because this will make it easy. We'll just fly through the seven trumpets and the seven bowls, because they're the, basically the same thing. So we took some time here at the beginning, but we'll fly through, the other parts. But Joe.
Did you see the news on the Turkish MP?
The Turkish?
Yeah, he's a minister.
Oh, the one who dropped dead?
He didn't die, he brought
Oh.
a heart attack, but it was interesting because he was doing a full rant and rave on the evilness of Israel and how Israel will not, he finished his speech by saying Israel will not escape the punishment of Allah.
Yeah.
He straightened up.
He fell over. I saw that. I thought maybe he died because he went down like a sack of potatoes, man. Yeah. Okay, Andy, and then if there's no other questions, we'll finish up.
Aren't the Jews still worshiping the temple at the western wall that will be raised again?
Well, the Western Wall isn't part of the temple because the whole temple was wiped out. The Western Wall is a wall that was around the city. They worship at the Western Wall. I don't think they worship the wall. I don't think
That's
they.
what they're calling for us to be rising of the temple.
Well, no, yeah, right. They do want, some Jews want, the more Orthodox Jews want a new temple. This is something really funny about the temple. The last thing about the temple is that, to Orthodox Jews, the place to worship is the temple. Okay. And then there's synagogues. Okay. And that's where they are. Is the more liberal Jews, okay, the Reformed Jews and that, especially in America, started calling their synagogues temples. You drive around, you'll see Temple Beth somebody. In fact, it's probably the one here that's, whichever way I'm facing, here in town up on Acoma is probably Temple something, because they've resigned themselves to the fact that there is no more temple, there never will be a temple. We don't need a temple. We do not need sacrifices, and this is why Orthodox Jews don't accept Reformed Jews as, true Jews. They won't marry them or, any of that stuff. But anyway, but they changed the name to make a point of, we don't need temple. So when you hear that, yeah, the Jews want to rebuild the temple. Well, some Jews, do. Deacon.
Yeah, when we were visiting over there, the guys are wearing the long piglets and all. that
Right.
sort of stuff, and they're bowing at the wall and moving all the way up where they put their head on the wall.
Right.
And I asked the guy, pull him aside, and I says, what are you doing? We call this, we're moving our bones for the Lord.
Yeah.
That's all, not calling for a new wall, not calling
Right,
for a new
yeah,
building.
yeah.
Move our bones for
Yeah.
the Lord. Okey-dokey, forgot.
Okay, and as much as we may disagree with what happens and who the Jews are and who the Christians are, this isn't to say anything about current Judaism and what happens in Israel. That's a completely different thing. We keep it here and what the Bible, what the Bible talks about. So, okay, so, Lowell.
You read from Josephus a couple of weeks ago, and you talk about they slaughtered all the Jews, the women, the children,
Right.
old people, and you quoted some guy that started with a V or something like.
Yeah, and I can't remember.
Okay.
Yeah,
Later.
yeah. No, well, he was the one that led the Roman armies.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think that the point of that, about the killing of the women and the Jews and the old people, is that the people themselves did it, because you had Roman, Greek people living in the town and Jewish people living in the town who before the siege got along just fine. But once there was a siege, now they didn't trust each other. So within the cities, not just Jerusalem, in the cities all through there, what he was making the point was that they were so afraid and distrustful that they were killing each other. That's how bad the situation was, is that they couldn't even team up to fight the Romans. They were fighting each other. Maybe I'll find another passage out of there to, do. I mean, I'm telling you, it's a bad time. We talked about, hey, the Romans came in, they destroyed the temple, and we leave it at that without even thinking how bad it is. Like that. I mean, it was a bad deal. Okay, we ready? Okay.
Yes, everybody have a copy, you can see,
Do we have a copy?
most of you know it by heart.
I'm gonna turn off the recording. You guys are all welcome to say it. Troy, good to see you. Herb, good to see you. Oh, and Ray already left. Okay. Let me, stop the recording.